Hey everybody, and welcome back for another video in our short studies in the book of Acts. This is part of our big Acts series. We're going to start the verse by verse study in a couple weeks. And this is just kind of a one-off study, diving a little deeper into one section of the text. So these are going to accompany the verse by verse stuff. So if you are interested in the longer form study, that's going to be coming out. Keep an eye on the YouTube channel and on the website. Speaking of the website, if you want this little outline that I've created that we are going to discuss, there's a link down in the description below. And I just wanted to thank all of the patrons that support this channel, because they make stuff like this possible and make it free for everybody to have around the world. So I was reading in Acts chapter 2, and there's some big events that happen in Acts chapter 2. It's the day of Pentecost. The Holy Spirit comes down on the apostles. They're speaking in tongues and foreign languages, and 3,000 people get baptized. But in between that, there's a sermon that gets preached by Peter. And as I was digging into it, writing my notes on it, I was realizing, man, there's a lot of stuff here. And so I just wanted to give kind of a breakdown of Peter's major points in that sermon in Acts chapter 2, verse 14 through 36. And maybe if you're looking for more of an explanation on this will be helpful. And if you want a longer form discussion of the same text, you can go over to our website and grab the verse by verse notes or watch that video when it comes out. Peter's sermon is really a 3-point lesson. Maybe this is where all the 3-point sermons that preachers have today comes from. This is the pattern. It's really a 3-point lesson though, and Peter is trying to prove that Jesus is the Messiah, and he is the Christ, the anointed one of God, and he uses 3 Old Testament prophecies to do it. The first one is from the book of Joel, and then the last 2 are from the Psalms. They're both written by King David. When the apostles start speaking in tongues, everyone wonders what's going on, and to explain what's happening, Peter cites this prophecy out of Joel chapter 2, verse 28 through 32. Joel there prophesies that the Lord is going to send his Spirit, the Holy Spirit, on his followers, that there's going to be signs and wonders that are performed, and that salvation is going to be offered to everyone who calls upon the name of the Lord. So Peter says, this is what's happening. It's a fulfillment of this long-awaited prophecy. The Holy Spirit has come down and given power to God's followers. It's visible and it's undeniable. Signs and wonders have been observed, namely through Jesus, and those signs and wonders have attested to the fact that he is from God. He has God's approval. And then in fulfillment of that statement about salvation being offered to everyone who calls upon the name of the Lord, this is the first time now, after Jesus' death on the cross, the sacrifice has been made, the first time that salvation is being offered to people, anyone who comes to God and asks for that grace. And remember that Joel was a prophet in the Old Testament. The Old Testament scriptures were the source of authority for the Jews. And so as they hear this, and as they hear Peter explaining how this passage that they're probably all familiar with is coming to fruition right before their eyes, they probably start to perk up and say, oh, maybe we should listen to this guy some more. The next prophecy is from King David, and it's in Psalm 16, verse 8 through 11. And the gist of it is that David spoke of one who would escape Hades. Hades is like the blackness of the grave. He would escape Hades, he would escape death, and his body wouldn't be corrupted or decayed, like when people are buried and their body starts to decompose. Well, who was David talking about in that verse? Well, he couldn't have been talking about himself directly, and we know that because Peter says that the Jews that he was talking to, they knew where David was buried. They could go dig up his body if they really wanted to, and he had decayed and died just like every other man. So David wasn't talking about himself, rather he was speaking of one who would represent him, one who was to come, one who would sit on his throne forever and would fulfill another prophecy given in 2 Samuel chapter 7, verse 13, where God promised David that he would establish his throne forever. Well, if there was going to be such a man who could sit on a throne forever, that man had to be able to escape death and decay and corruption. That man had to have power over death. Well, who can claim that power? One who's resurrected from the dead, right? Jesus. Jesus is the only one who can claim that power. So Peter's making the case, look, Jesus is gone, his tomb is empty, he beat death, and now, just as was promised in Luke chapter 1, verse 32, he has resurrected to reign eternally on the throne of his father David. So Peter's saying, look, it's not a mistake that the tomb is empty over there. This stuff has been prophesied for years and years, and now he's connecting the dots for his audience. So then the final prophecy that Peter quotes is from Psalm 110, verse 1. This one is also a prophecy of King David. And King David prophesied that his, quote, Lord would ascend to heaven and would sit with God at his throne. Peter again says that David wasn't talking about himself. He was prophesying of someone who would come in the future. But wait, David was a great figure in Jewish history, like one of the greatest. Who could rightly claim the title of being David's Lord or his superior? David was speaking of that greater king who would come to sit on his throne, not just for a lifetime, but forever. Peter told his audience that the scenes that were playing out right in front of their eyes on that Pentecost day were proof that Jesus had done this. Jesus had ascended to heaven and was now at the throne with God. Well, how? What were these people seeing taking place in front of them that was proof of Jesus being on the throne? Well, for one, the Holy Spirit had been given just as Jesus had promised to his followers. He promised that in John 7, verse 39, John 14, John 15, John 16, and in Acts chapter 1, verse 8. In John chapter 7, verse 39, John wrote that the Spirit of God would be given after Jesus was glorified. In other words, after Jesus ascended and God exalted him at his throne. And so that's exactly what was happening. The Spirit had been given, which means that Jesus kept his promises, which means that he must have escaped death, he must have resurrected, and he must have ascended. If Jesus was some kind of lying fraud, God certainly wouldn't have sent divine, miraculous power to his disciples on earth. But if Jesus wasn't a fraud, what did that make him? Well, exactly what he claimed to be, the Christ of God. So Peter draws this whole thing to a conclusion in verse 36, and his conclusion is that the Jews and us can know for sure, with certainty, that God has made Jesus both Lord and Christ. Well, thanks everybody for watching. I know this is a little bit different subject than what we usually tackle, breaking down the text like this, but I thought it might be helpful and I wanted to document this for myself so I didn't kind of forget the flow of the discussion later on, because if you don't write stuff down, you forget it. I've learned that lesson the hard way too many times. So if you do want this handout, check out the link down below, and there's a bunch of other handouts and printables and videos and articles on the website. Go check all those out.